Okay, so, like if you're into fitness at all, right, there's this like constant thing.
Yeah.
The desire to maybe pack on a bit more muscle, you know, like sculpt the physique a tad.
Uh-huh.
And the second you even think about it, it's like,
Boom.
bam, you're just bombarded with info, right? Some solid advice, but let's face it,
Oh, yeah.
a whole lot of garbage floating around too.
It really is. It's like the Wild West out there when it comes to like muscle building.
Totally.
So many rules, the so-called secrets.
Right.
And honestly, a lot of it has very little basis in actual science.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's really what we're aiming for with this deep dive,
Yeah.
to cut through all that confusion. So we've taken a close look at it at a bunch of different sources, articles on training, the science behind diet, supplements, all to help you understand, what truly works and what's a straight up myth.
Exactly. We want to arm you with the knowledge to train like effectively, but also sustainably.
Yes. Yes.
All right, so let's just jump right into a big one, shall we?
Let's do it.
So it's the dream, right? I can get as big as a pro bodybuilder, no steroids, just takes longer. What's the real story here?
Well, based on everything we've been going through, the reality is pretty different, to be honest.
Yeah.
The consistent message across the board is that these pro bodybuilders, they achieve those, extreme levels of muscle mass.
It's another level, right?
It really is that leanness, the continuous growth. It's through using steroids or other performance enhancing drugs.
Right.
And without, that kind of hormonal manipulation, to get to that level of development, it's just not biologically possible.
Yeah. For most of us, right?
For the vast majority of people, absolutely.
It feels like some parts of the fitness industry, though, they kind of blur that line on purpose, don't they?
Yeah, there's definitely a financial incentive sometimes, to kind of push the idea that you can get those physiques just through supplements
Right.
and hard work alone. And while supplements definitely have a role, supportive role, they're not going to replicate the effects of hormones.
Right.
Like you can't mimic that effect.
Okay. But it's not all doom and gloom, right?
No.
Because the same sources say that like significant physique changes, those are totally achievable naturally.
Absolutely. Yeah. The key takeaway is that a truly impressive physique and the self-respect that comes with it, right?
Totally.
And good health, like those are achievable for pretty much everyone through consistent, smart training, good nutrition, and rest. So while you might not be stepping on a Mr. Olympia stage,
Right.
building a body that you feel confident in, that is definitely a realistic goal.
And a healthy one, hopefully.
And a healthy one, yeah.
Okay, so myth number 2, this hits right at the dinner table. In order to get really big, you got to eat a ton.
Yeah.
A super high calorie diet. And I can see people thinking, okay, time to eat everything in sight.
Yeah.
But is that really the secret?
Not really, no. It's a common trap.
Okay.
And while it is true that, your body needs those extra calories to build muscle, if you just go on an uncontrolled, like crazy high calorie diet, you're just going to gain a lot of weight.
Okay.
And most of it's going to be fat.
Yeah.
The research suggests like 65% of that extra weight is going to be fat.
Oof. So all those extra pancakes aren't like magically building biceps then?
Not quite, no. It's interesting. One of our sources, citing Dr. Scott Connolly, points out that only about 20–25% of muscle growth actually comes from increased protein synthesis.
Yeah.
The rest of it's things like satellite cell proliferation.
Okay.
And just shoving a ton of calories in, that's not the main driver for that. It's kind of like trying to water a single plant, but you flood the whole garden,
Right.
It's not the most efficient way.
So it's less about the sheer volume of food and more about like being a bit more targeted.
Exactly, yeah. Preventing the breakdown of your existing muscle, what we call anti-catabolism, that seems to be way more important than just eating a ton.
Okay.
Because constantly overfeeding, it can mess with your hormones,
Yeah.
things like insulin sensitivity, and that can actually lead to more muscle breakdown.
Oh, wow.
So unless you've got like a really unusual metabolism, or you're very underweight, or you're using, the performance enhancers, the super high calorie thing, not the best way.
All right. That's good to know before I order that extra large pizza then.
Probably wise.
Okay, here's another one. Sounds almost too good to be true. If you eat a low-fat diet, Doesn't matter how many calories, you won't gain fat. Is there any truth to that?
No, not really. The bottom line is that if you consistently eat more than your body burns, you're going to gain fat.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much fat is in your diet.
So calorie balance is still king.
Always, yeah. Now, it is true that super high-fat diets can lead to faster weight gain because fat is very calorie dense.
Yeah.
And your body stores it pretty efficiently. But a huge surplus of calories from carbs, like in those weight gainers,
Yeah.
that'll also pack on the fat.
Gotcha. So it's the total energy balance that matters most.
That's it, yeah. Not just the fat percentage.
Okay. Let's move on to training.
All right.
Here's a myth I think a lot of beginners fall for.
Yeah.
The more you work out, the more you'll grow.
Right.
Sounds kind of logical at first.
It does.
But is it that simple?
No, it's actually pretty damaging. It can totally mess with your progress. Our sources all say that like 95% of pro bodybuilders,
Wow.
even the ones using steroids, they'll tell you that overtraining was their biggest mistake.
So even with the help, they can still overtrain.
Yeah, so for someone training naturally,
Yeah.
the risk is even higher.
Okay. So too much of a good thing then.
Absolutely. If you train too often, you don't give those muscles time to recover, rebuild.
Uh-huh.
You're going to stall out. No growth. You might even lose muscle.
Oh, wow.
Train hard every single day. It's a recipe for overtraining.
Yeah.
A muscle group that's been worked intensely, like to failure, that can take 5 to 10 days to fully recover.
That's way longer than I think most people realize.
It is. And it's not just working the same muscle group. Even training different parts on consecutive days can slow you down. So, you push your legs to the absolute limit. Your whole body's got to recover.
Right.
Expecting to hit a crazy upper body workout the next day,
Yeah.
not going to work.
Not going to work.
Rest isn't just, downtime.
Yeah.
It's part of the training.
Right. Okay.
You might actually find you do better with as much time out of the gym as in it.
Makes sense. Okay, so sticking with that training duration thing, here's another one.
Yeah.
The longer you're in the gym, the better.
Right.
I see people like doing these marathon sessions.
Yeah.
Is that really necessary?
Not at all. There's no need to do like 20, 30 sets. Even 10 sets can be overkill sometimes.
Really?
Research shows you can totally fatigue a muscle in one set.
One set.
One set, if it's intense enough.
So how do you get that level of fatigue in one set?
You got to push to what's called ischemic rigor.
Okay.
It's where you're using the maximum muscle fibers and you push them to the point they freeze up.
Okay.
Instead of relaxing between those contractions.
Right.
And this extreme stress, that's what triggers muscle growth. It's like squeezing a muscle so hard it cramps and can't relax.
So what are some ways to reach that intensity in a single set?
So things like drop sets, breakdown sets. You do reps till you can't anymore. You drop the weight, keep going till failure.
Uh-huh.
Or pushing to your absolute max reps, very short rests, like going beyond your normal energy levels.
Okay.
Once you really hit that point, more sets don't really do much unless it's like back or chest. Big muscles, different areas you might want to hit.
Gotcha. This is making me rethink my whole training approach.
It happens.
All right. Here's one that makes you think about strength and size. You don't have to be strong to be big.
Right.
So what's the link between the two?
So it is true. People can have different strength levels with similar muscle mass. Things like fiber types, nerve efficiency, even limb length, that all plays a role. But strength, it's still super relevant for growth.
Okay.
Especially if you're training naturally. The basic idea is that you have to get stronger to grow.
So progressive overload.
That's the key, yeah. You got to put those muscle fibers under tension to grow.
Right.
Lifting light weights,
Yeah.
it's not going to cut it. You got to gradually increase that weight you're lifting. That's how you build muscle.
Now, this next one, I think it catches a lot of people, especially beginners.
Yeah.
They see the biggest guys in the gym and they think, okay, I got to train like them.
Right.
The programs that work best for pro bodybuilders are best for everyone.
It seems logical.
It seems logical.
But it's usually misguided.
Okay.
Pro bodybuilders get that big because of, pharmaceuticals, genetics, the whole package. One source put it really well.
Yeah.
Follow a horse home, you'll find horse parents.
Mm.
Meaning the person in your gym who's made the most gains naturally.
Right.
That's who you should learn from. Pro bodybuilders, they're on a different level.
Right.
Their results are not the benchmark for natural lifters.
Their bodies are like working differently, right?
Totally. They're kind of different hormonal conditions.
Yeah.
And their routines, they often involve crazy high volume, way more than a natural lifter can handle.
Hmm.
If the average person tries that, overtraining, maybe even muscle loss.
Oof.
So for natural lifters,
Yeah.
moderate volume, good form, focusing on that lowering part of the lift,
Okay.
that's where it's at.
All right, let's tackle a diet myth now.
All right.
This one's about calorie deficits. You can't build muscle on a sub-maintenance calorie intake diet.
Hmm.
So is that a hard rule, or are there exceptions?
Well, it's definitely harder, and you need a smarter approach.
Okay.
But it's possible.
It's possible.
It's possible. Our bodies are pretty amazing. They can regulate how nutrients get used.
Okay.
It's called nutrient partitioning. Your nervous system, hormones, they all play a role. And these things can affect body comp even if your calories aren't super high.
So it's not as simple as just calories in versus calories out.
It's more complex than that. Yeah, energy balance is important, but there's more to it. Like, they use clenbuterol in cattle, you know?
Hmm.
They gain muscle, lose fat without eating more. And certain hormones in humans do similar things. Growth hormone, some estrogens, cortisol, ephedrine, IGF-1.
Right.
They can shift things around. And the crucial thing is, it's not just drugs, you know?
Yeah.
Certain nutrients, the right amounts, combined with good training,
Uh-huh.
that can help you build muscle even in a deficit. It's tough, but it's doable.
All right, here's another common question about training frequency. You can't grow if you only work each body part once a week.
Right.
Now, I know people say you got to hit muscles multiple times.
Yeah.
But what does the science say?
Well, our sources actually support the once-a-week idea. If you train intensely enough, it can take 5, even 10 days for a muscle to fully recover.
Hmm.
There was even a study that showed that forearm muscles took weeks to get back to full strength after a really hard workout.
Weeks.
Weeks, even though they didn't feel sore anymore.
That's a long time.
It is. Now, I'm not saying wait months between workouts, but it shows that recovery takes longer than we think.
Yeah.
So for some people, especially if you're training naturally and pushing hard, that full week of rest might be best.
So sometimes doing less can actually lead to better results.
Exactly.
Interesting. And that kind of ties into the next myth.
Yeah.
You can't make gains if you only train 3 days a week.
Right.
A lot of people think you got to be in the gym almost every day
Yeah.
to see results.
It's a common belief.
But is it true?
Well, you won't see many steroid users doing just 3 days.
Right.
But there's no reason it can't work for natural athletes.
Really?
As long as it's a good full body routine and you're pushing to failure,
Yep.
it's about intensity and smart program design.
Gotcha.
If you train less often, though, you do have to pay extra attention to your diet,
Yeah.
especially if you've got a sedentary job.
Right, right.
But the idea that 3 days a week is just for recreational lifters,
Yeah.
that's just not true. It's about quality, not just quantity.
Okay, so let's talk about rest periods.
Within a workout.
Yeah.
Okay.
You always hear you should only rest 45 seconds between sets
Right.
for muscle endurance, fat burning, all that. But what about if you want to get big and strong?
So that 45 seconds, it's good for cardio, maybe burning a few extra calories during your workout.
Okay,
But for muscle growth, you need more time.
gotcha.
You gotta let those muscles recover, clear out the lactic acid, replenish your energy stores.
But you're basically saying give your muscles a chance to catch up so you can hit it hard again.
Exactly. If you want to lift heavy and stimulate muscle growth, you gotta let those fibers recover. Lifting heavy with lactic acid buildup is like trying to swim with concrete shoes.
Interesting analogy.
So when you're going for strength and size, at least 2-3 minutes between heavy sets. Now, it's not always about lifting the absolute heaviest, right?
Yeah.
That's where periodization comes in. You cycle through heavy and lighter phases.
Okay.
So you're not always pushing to the max.
Gotcha. All right, now this next myth is all about equipment. You got to use fancy weightlifting equipment to make the best gains. All those high-tech machines to be pretty tempting.
They are. They look fancy. But while machines definitely have their place, they're not as good as free weights for building muscle.
Really. So good old barbells and dumbbells.
Those are the most effective.
Still the best.
Still the best. Think squats, bench press, shoulder press, deadlift.
The classics.
The classics. And there's a good reason. Research shows that a lot of machines don't have a good eccentric component. That's the lowering part of the lift.
Uh-huh.
And that's crucial for muscle growth. Free weights, they make you stabilize the weight.
Yeah.
More muscle fibers get involved. You get a better eccentric contraction.
Okay.
So while machines can be useful for isolation exercises, maybe for beginners learning the movements, free weights, and those compound exercises,
Yeah.
that's the foundation.
All right, let's clear up a common misunderstanding about exercise.
Okay.
Weight training makes you big. Aerobic exercise cuts you up.
Right.
So is it really that black and white?
Not really, no. Getting that cut up look, it's mostly about your diet. You got to create a calorie deficit.
Right.
How you do it. Diet, exercise, both
Uh-huh.
less important than just doing it.
So you're saying cardio burns calories, but lifting also helps with fat loss.
Exactly. Cardio is good for burning calories during the activity,
Right.
but lifting, it builds muscle. And more muscle means you burn more calories even at rest.
Makes sense.
Now, studies do show that your body might burn a higher percentage of fat during cardio,
Okay.
like steady state for over 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But the total calories burned and the long-term boost to your metabolism from lifting,
Uh-huh.
that makes weight training great for fat loss, too. Imagine two twins.
Okay.
One lifts weights, the other just does cardio.
Yeah.
The lifter's probably going to burn more fat overall because they've got more muscle.
All right, here's a myth about targeting specific muscle development. People talk about exercises to like build a peak on their biceps.
Right.
You can completely reshape a muscle by doing isolation exercises.
I wish I were that easy.
So is there any truth to that?
The shape of your muscles, it's mostly genetics. You can definitely make a muscle bigger,
Yeah.
but you can't really change its shape. When a muscle contracts, the whole thing contracts. You can't tell just one part to grow.
So those isolation exercises like concentration curls, they might make your biceps bigger,
Yeah,
but they're not going to magically give you a higher peak if you don't have the genetics for it.
exactly. You can emphasize certain parts, but you're not changing the overall structure.
Okay.
Look at pictures of bodybuilders at different stages. Their muscles get bigger, but the shape stays pretty much the same.
Now this next one is about how your muscles feel during a workout.
Yeah,
A lot of people think if I get a pump, I'm working the muscles, right?
right.
Or if my muscles are burning, that means I'm building muscle.
The burn, the pump.
The burn, the pump.
Yeah, those are good feelings. But are they accurate signs of muscle growth? Not really.
So what are they then?
A pump, it's just blood rushing into the muscle. It swells up. You can get a pump from light weights, high reps.
Okay.
Doesn't mean you're actually building muscle. Same with the burn. That's lactic acid buildup. You can get that from all sorts of exercise, not just muscle building stuff.
Right.
So the pump, the burn, they're more about blood flow and your metabolism, not the muscle damage and repair that leads to growth. For that, you need tension.
Okay.
Heavy weights, that's what triggers hypertrophy.
All right, let's tackle another persistent myth. This one's about abs.
Okay, let me guess.
Hundreds of sit-ups a day will get to a six-pack.
The classic.
The classic. People think if I just target my abs enough, the fat will melt away.
The spot reduction myth.
The spot reduction myth.
And it's simply not true.
Yeah.
You can do all the sit-ups you want, you'll build strong abs,
Uh-huh.
but they'll be hidden under fat if you don't lose that fat.
So you can have strong abs, but they might not show.
Exactly. Same as doing tons of inner thigh exercises.
Right.
Doesn't magically melt the fat there. To lose fat, you need a calorie deficit,
Yeah.
diet, exercise, or both.
All right, here's one that might calm some fears in the gym. Training like a power lifter, all those heavy deadlifts, squats, bench presses, that'll make you look blocky. Some people, especially bodybuilders, they worry about that.
Yeah.
Is it a valid concern?
Whether you look blocky, it's mostly your genetics,
Okay.
your bone structure.
Right.
Powerlifting will just make a blocky person bigger and blockier.
Gotcha.
Now you can do things to offset a blocky look.
Yeah.
Build your lats, work your outer thighs, stay lean.
Okay.
That creates an illusion of a less blocky physique.
Right.
But those powerlifting exercises, they're great for building muscle, period.
Here's another one about reps. High repetitions make your muscles harder and more cut up.
That's a common one.
Yeah. So is there something about lifting lighter weights for more reps that gives you that ripped look?
Not really. High reps might increase sclerization a bit.
Okay.
That's more blood vessels in the muscle.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make them harder.
Right.
And that cut up look, that's about low body fat,
Okay.
revealing those muscles underneath.
Right.
High reps can help you burn calories, maybe contribute to a calorie deficit.
Uh-huh.
But for building rock hard muscles, heavy weights, 5 to 8 reps, that's your ticket.
Gotcha. All right, let's move on to training philosophy.
Sounds good.
Instinctive training is the best way to make gains.
Okay.
So just showing up at the gym, doing whatever feels right.
Yeah.
Is that really the best approach?
Instinctive training? It's a catchy phrase.
Yeah.
But for natural lifters,
Uh-huh.
probably not the best.
Okay.
If we followed our instincts all the time, we'd probably just skip the gym and have a beer, right?
Some days, yeah.
So for consistent gains, you need a more structured approach,
Mhm.
something like periodization.
Right.
You change up the intensity, volume, exercises over time.
Yeah.
Like you gradually increase the weight over a few weeks, then back off for a bit.
Okay.
That keeps you progressing, prevents plateaus.
All right, here's a question about men and women.
Yeah.
Women need to train differently than men. So do men and women need different approaches to weightlifting?
Well, at the basic level, muscle is muscle. Male or female, it's pretty much the same.
Okay.
The main difference in how much muscle they can build comes down to hormones.
Right, testosterone.
Testosterone, yeah. So if a man and a woman have the same goals,
Yeah.
there's no reason they should train differently.
So the exercises, sets, reps, all that can be pretty much the same.
Exactly. Differences usually come down to personal preference or goals.
Okay.
A woman might focus more on glutes and legs.
Yeah.
A man might prioritize chest and back.
Right.
But the principles of muscle growth, those are universal.
Now, let's talk supplements. This one's about the big claim you always see.
What's that?
There are supplements out there that are just as good as steroids, but safer.
The Holy Grail.
The Holy Grail. So, are there any supplements that live up to that hype?
Honestly, no. The only things as good as steroids are other steroids.
Mm-hmm.
All those natural steroid alternatives.
Yeah.
They don't work like the real deal.
Oh, why?
Now, supplements can be helpful.
Mhm.
They can fill in nutritional gaps, maybe help with recovery.
Right.
But they're not going to build muscle like steroids. And remember, everyone responds differently to supplements.
Okay.
Genetics, diet, training, it all plays a role. So people might see great results, others not so much.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Definitely not.
All right, here's one about the health of those at the top of the bodybuilding world.
Yeah.
Professional bodybuilders represent the epitome of health and fitness. It's easy to look at those physiques and think they're the picture of health.
It is. It is. But the reality,
Yep.
often quite different.
Okay.
You know, most athletes, they peak for competition.
Right.
Bodybuilders, they're often exhausted, their health is compromised, extreme dieting, dehydration, intense training, and often drugs.
So all that prep for competition can actually be bad for their health.
Yeah, it can. Think about the sheer volume of food they eat,
Yeah.
especially in the off season when they're using those anabolic agents.
Right.
And compare that to, populations known for longevity.
Okay.
They often eat less or just enough,
Uh-huh.
less food, less stress on the body. And professional bodybuilders, they often have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, strain on their hearts from all that mass.
Yeah.
So while moderate weight training and a good diet are healthy, pushing it to the extremes like that,
Uh-huh.
it's often more about vanity than health.
Okay, here's a myth about weight training and flexibility.
All right.
Weight training makes you tight, hinders flexibility, and hurts athletic performance.
Right.
Some athletes avoid weights because of that.
Yeah, they don't want to get muscle bound.
Exactly. So is there any truth to that?
Well, if you train, right, full range of motion,